3 words: solo speaking habit. So we often think of everything else in language learning, reading, listening, writing, vocab, grammar, all of that stuff, as being something you can do solo, something you do alone, right? But speaking, you've got to wait until your weekly lesson. You've got to wait until someone is stood in front of you. You've got to wait until you're immersed and you're ordering your food with the waiter. No, you don't. You don't have to wait to speak. You're figuring out what you want to say, how you want to say it, and then you're actually articulating it and saying it, right? So when you're doing a solo speaking habit, you can be getting better at all of these stages.
Hi, Lindsay.
Hello.
Well, welcome to the podcast. First of all, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And yeah, before we get started, with your language background, just like a quick menu of the day, like we're going to talk about your experience with languages, the way you go about learning languages, and your many experiences with them, right? And as usual, we'll talk about the transition between input and output, because again, I feel like it's a really important topic, or something that most people struggle with, like I said, myself included at times. Mm-hmm. And so that's the menu. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your language background to get started?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Lindsay from the UK, and my business is Lindsay Does Languages. Initially, that was private tuition. I was driving around teaching French, English, and Spanish after school. And then as things went on, that moved online. And then I was noticing this consistent pattern where I would see a student and then go back the next week and say, so how did it go? What have you done this week between the lessons? And it would always be a similar answer. It was like, well, I got busy and then this happened and I didn't really know what to do with this. And I thought, okay, there's a piece of this puzzle that is missing, and it's not necessarily to do with bad teaching or a bad student. It's just that we've been so kind of conditioned, if you like, to what language learning looks like from school and all of that, that we've forgotten the very important bit of it, and that is how to learn languages. And so that's what I do now. So I don't teach languages explicitly. Instead, I teach how to learn languages so that people have the skills they need to be able to do it for themselves, to work with a tutor if they want to, and to really feel much more confident in their decisions and the process, rather than just feeling like, I'm never going to be fluent, which happens to far too many people.
True. Yeah, I like that. And I'm curious. I got a lot of questions, but what are the most important things for you, like when it comes to understanding how the language process works, or what do you tell your clients?
Well, the most important thing, like number one, is that you need to be the very center of your language learning, right? And so if you have maybe you've struggled with it and you're thinking, how do I do this? And so you've got to the point where you realize that the how-to is the missing piece. So you search online, you go on YouTube and you have a look around, and that's someone else's idea of what that looks like or how to learn languages, right? And so for me, when I work with my clients, it's not like, this is the method, the system, the one size fits all way of how to do it. It's more like, no, this is the toolbox. Now let's work together to customize this and make it work for you, so that you're using the right tools at the right moment, and you know how to do that when I'm like no longer there, when I'm not around, right? Not when I'm dead. That sounds like I'm morbid. When I'm no longer around, you know what I mean? And so the first thing is centering yourself and like recognizing, what am I good at? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And what do I actually enjoy about languages? Why do I want to learn this language? How can I make sure that that remains part of the process all the way? Because the other big risk is that we rely too much on someone else's decision, whether that is a tutor telling you we're going to study this, 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 and this, or whether it is a textbook saying this is chapter 1, this is chapter 2, this is chapter 3, and we just follow like, yep, okay, yep, I'm doing it, I'm doing what it tells me to. But actually, when we become more understanding of how it all works, we're able to then become our own teacher and go forward with that as our like focus of like, right, I'm deciding. And, you can then work with a teacher, but you're involved in that process. You're not just showing up blindly to the lesson, being like, right, let's see what washes over me for this next hour. You're able to say to them, this is what I want to do, and here's how I want to do it, and this is how I learn, etc., etc. So yeah, those are two of the big things, like centering yourself, becoming your own teacher, so that you can really feel confident in those decisions and the whole process that you make for yourself.
Nice. Yeah, I like that, because I guess also like the types of resources that you're consuming and things like that. Yeah, because I always talk about it. Like, I think it works for pretty much anything in life, to be honest, but I'm not sure. But what I mean is, if you're not enjoying the process, your motivation is only going to take you so far, right? Will and motivation is going to take you so far. Because if you, back to your example, if you're following like chapter 1, chapter 2, like you said, but you don't enjoy it, I mean, you'll keep going to some point, but sooner or later, if you're not enjoying it, just give it out.
Yeah, because there's two possibilities with that. If you're following the textbook, either you're someone who is a bit more rebellious in your nature and you think, screw this doesn't work. So you chuck that out and then you try something new, and then that doesn't work. So then everything just gets poo-pooed and put to the sideline. Or you're someone who thinks, well, I've started it, so I need to finish. A bit of a perfectionist in that way. And so you keep going, even though it's not quite working. And you think, well, I'll just get to the end. I'll just finish the book. And this, I'm probably speaking more from personal experience on this side of things compared to the other, where, you then think, I'll just finish. And then, chapter 20, when I get to the last page, everything will magically click into place.
Right.
Obviously not quite what's going to happen.
Yeah. I'll wake up and I'll be fluent. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Just a bit, it's exaggerated, but that's the way we think sometimes.
Yeah, it's true. It is.
Cool. And I'm also curious about your own journey. Like you said, you started teaching English, Spanish, and French. So how do you learn Spanish and French, first of all?
Well, English is my mother tongue. So, and I grew up in the Midlands in a very kind of normal British town, monolingual family, monolingual mostly school. Languages weren't really around me in that way. But in primary school, I had the option to go to an extracurricular French club. And so my mum would say to me every term, do you still want to do French club? Because, she would have to sign the form and pay the fees for the French club. And I'd say, yeah. And I kept saying, yeah, because they gave us croissants at the end of each term. We had like a little French party. We had croissants and orange juice. And I thought that's enough for me to enjoy French, to want to keep going. So I did that for a few years in primary school. And then when I went to secondary school, it was French again. My school was just French. There was no Spanish, no German. And for the first 2 years, really, I was bored as anything. I was in a class full of people who didn't care. It was very much like, why do we have to learn French? Everyone speaks English, all of that kind of rhetoric. But then also I was doing the same stuff that I had done for 2 or 3 years in primary school. So I was being taught like a child, like a young child, but I was 11. And at 11, you've gone to big school. You feel like things should be different. I'm not a kid anymore. Why are you telling me cat, dog, blue, green? Like, whatever. Show me something useful. So the first 2 years of French were really, really boring. Then I got put into like a tiered, sort of ability graded class.
Okay.
So I was in the class with people that were like my level, with a good teacher. And that helped. But still, it was just like a thing that I was good at. Like it wasn't something I really cared about. So it wasn't until around about that time, that third year, when Shakira released Laundry Service. And I was like, this is so cool. And so I bought the album, which obviously was mostly English, but had some Spanish songs, and in particular, some Spanish versions of some of the English songs on it. So it was like, oh, well, I know the song already. I know what she's saying in English. It would be really cool to be able to know the Spanish. I had my little lyrics booklet, you know. And so for a birthday, I then had, I got one of the old Spanish albums, Donde están las ladrones, and a little Spanish gem dictionary. And I was sat there, like, you know, looking up every word, which obviously doesn't work, right. Especially with a dictionary that size, and especially with Shakira lyrics that are quite abstract. But yeah, so I was like, you know, really into that. So then when I was able to pick my options, Spanish, I was just lucky. Spanish became an option. We then got a Spanish teacher at the school. And so they made it a GCSE choice. And they also said, if you opt to do Spanish or German, which was the other new language option available to us, you have to do French to prove that you can do languages. Okay. Well, okay, whatever. I'm good enough at French to get a decent grade. Was fine. I didn't think anything of it. I just wanted to do Spanish. I thought that was cool. I was interested in it. But then, of course, as you go on, you realize, oh, it's quite cool to be able to know more than one language. Amazing. More than two. Like, oh, that's really cool. And so when it came to them picking the next set of exams, didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. So I thought, well, I'll just keep up with both the languages, go as far as I can go with this. So I did French and Spanish again at A-level. Then it was like university time, and I was a bit like, that's not for me. I don't really want to go to a brick university, as I call it. And, you know, I just wasn't interested. So I went to Costa Rica instead. I went and spent 3 months. I was teaching English in a school. I was living with a local family. I was like, when people talk about immersion, like that was immersion. Yeah. So 4 years of Spanish, like classroom study, that then prepared me for this 3 months in at the deep end. Now you've actually got to speak. You know, all I'd really done before that in terms of speaking was the oral exams, where you just memorize and then you repeat, you know. So it was a real filling in the final piece of the puzzle for me in terms of what was missing with the Spanish. And yeah, from there, I just felt like, well, now the world has opened up to me. I saw how it was possible to travel more, how it was possible to learn like any language essentially. And I just kept going. So I came back to the UK, and then I did start a degree after like a year or so of trying to decide what to do. But I did it with the Open University. So it was distance learning. It was part-time. I could work at the same time. I could travel in the gaps between courses. And it worked out. It was exactly what I needed. And so I was able to then get a degree in French and Spanish. But the beginning of that degree, I had the same problem as I'd had at secondary school, where the first courses were like everything I'd already just done. Okay. And I thought, well, I could do that again and be bored, or I could do this Italian course and this Chinese course. So that was really the moment of like, let's see how many we can do. Let's just explore. Why not? So along the way, I did more of the Italian courses. I did some German courses with the OU. And then throughout that process, you know, it's 6 years because it's part-time. Throughout that process, I then started teaching myself languages. So I was now had the business. And so I was thinking, well, if I'm going to be writing about languages on my website, I need to be learning something that's not just for this academic purpose. Right. So I started learning Dutch. I did some Portuguese, Japanese. I just kind of kept going really and exploring as much as I could.
Cool. So we'll get into how you learn languages now, like what you do about it. But got one more question about your experience in Costa Rica. I'm curious, like I'm curious about your first day there. Like, how much could you understand? How much could you communicate?
It's a very good question. I'm glad you asked that. Well, the very beginning was you arrive at the airport and you go to this hostel and you're with everyone else that's about to set off all over the country on their own tours. So some people were doing like science things like sea turtles, conservation, whatever. Some people were doing maybe, I don't know, construction, and there were other people doing teaching English. So all sorts of different things, and you're all together. And so the first couple of days were not really in Spanish. It was all English.
Okay.
But then you get the bus yourself and you go to your town and your family pick you up at the bus stop at the other end. I was lucky enough in that I wasn't on my own. So there was a very wonderful person who sadly is no longer with us, called Bree, who was Australian. I was 18, she was 25. So she had these years of wisdom that I was like, wow, like she's so well-traveled. She's so good at Spanish. Like, you know, she was amazing. And she was staying with the grandparents of the family that I was staying with. So I was just so grateful that I had Bree there, because her Spanish, like, we arrived on day one at my family's house, and I thought I was really good at Spanish. I'd got the grades, I'd got the piece of paper, right? And I saw Bree just in her element, just so good, so conversational, so, you know, making everyone laugh, laughing along and understanding all the jokes. And I thought, whoa, I barely can say hola. Like it was a real eye-opening moment. And she hadn't done 4 years of study at school. You know, she'd I can't even remember how she learnt it, but yeah. So it was really this moment of observing someone else and thinking, oh, is that going to be me in 3 months? Do I get to that point? Wow. And then having that sort of aspiration for the next 3 months and years, honestly, I think she was a huge inspiration. Yeah.
Cool. So then, and then I guess when you got to the family, you had to speak Spanish all the time, right?
Yeah, the kids were learning English, but the parents didn't speak Spanish. Didn't speak English. And so I would help the kids with their English homework. And in the school, I would be teaching very detailed English. Like I remember at one point we were teaching the older kids like organs of the body and stuff like that. You know, it's all quite quite funny. But like that was there's a teacher. That wasn't my choice. I should add. And so yeah, with the family at home and on the weekends when like there would be another new auntie and cousin like every weekend, it was all Spanish. And if I didn't speak Spanish, I'd be sat on my own doing nothing. So yeah, and even to this day, I was lucky enough to go back and spend some time with the family. It was exactly 10 years after I'd been. And it felt like home. I felt so comfortable speaking Spanish around them. You know how normally when you speak another language, you still have this monitor, like just keeping track and checking that you've got everything right.
Yep.
No, with them, I just feel free in my Spanish. So yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, because I think that sometimes that's the danger of immersion, meaning that in your case, it was such a safe environment. Like you're living with the family, right? But sometimes we think that by moving to the country where the language is spoken, it's gonna magically happen, right?
And you know, this was 2008. This was before, like, I didn't have internet in the home.
Yeah.
If I wanted to use the internet, I would finish school and I would go to luckily there was a little internet cafe in the village. I would go there for about an hour after school, and then I'd walk home, and that was it. Either I'm sat on my own in the evening or I'm interacting. So it's full on immersion. And I think, yeah, there is this real like halo around the word immersion that it gets so amplified into being this magic bullet, this answer of, oh, well, I've been learning for a while, but I'm not fluent yet because I haven't had immersion. I haven't been immersed. I haven't, you know. And it's not the answer. Like you say, you could quite easily go to Costa Rica, Spain, Poland, wherever. Spend all your time indoors. Spend all your time outside. speaking English and not really using the language because you don't feel confident enough to try.
Yep.
And then, you may as well be anywhere in the world. So immersion to me is this myth that we need to let go of, that we can still recognize, the more that you are surrounded by a language, the better, but you don't have to necessarily go somewhere for that to be the case. You can do this at home. Like right now we're recording this and I'm in India. So I've been learning a bit of the Devanagari script so I can read Hindi. Because for me, reading the world around me is almost more important than being able to like speak. Like I don't really go around and just start random conversations with lots of people. It's just not who I am in my own language. So that's not to say that I don't interact.
Yeah.
I do sort of, ask people stuff and say hello, etc., etc. But being able to understand the world around me is really key. So I want to read that script. So now I'm here, I'm looking around and I'm seeing the signs and it's all really great and there's immersion there. But equally, I can create that at home. I can go on Google Maps. Right. I can zoom in. I can see the place names. I can go to Street View. I can read all the signs that way. Yeah. You can be anywhere and you can be immersed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking that there were like at least 3 things that work well for you in your experience in Costa Rica. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but first of all, you didn't start from scratch, which could be a problem when you move to the place and you know nothing. So that's the first good point. Then, like I said, you were with the family, because sometimes, like I see this a lot in Spain with people who want to learn English. I just moved to London, for example, right? And like you said, first of all, they already know someone from Spain who lives there, so they're going to be speaking Spanish most of the time.
Yeah.
Or they just go on their own entirely. And perhaps they're not starting from scratch because we've all had some kind of English instruction in high school, but it wasn't the best, so they can't communicate at all yet. And they don't go to a family or a safe environment like that. So everything's new for them. They need to use the language to communicate, but they can't, so it's frustrating. So I think your experience was great in that sense. Like, you're with a family. Another point, they're going to be speaking Spanish to you all the time. And like, if I'm moving to Poland, like I wanted to learn the language, but I don't need to be honest. Like, I know so many people, so many foreigners who live here, who've been living here for quite a while, and they don't speak the language because you don't need it, to be honest. I mean, it's nice to know it, and I wanted to, but you can live with English here, like entirely. So that's another thing. Like, during Costa Rica, there was no other option. Had to be Spanish, right? But in such a safe environment, in my opinion, like being with the family, because it's you're on your own, like, or you're with your friends for your home country, you're just not going to be ideal. And you can be there for a long time and end up frustrated because, it didn't work and it was supposed to, so you think it's your fault, right?
Yes. Oh, this is, yeah. You're so right. Immersion is just like any other resource, any other tool, in that it can work if you're intentional with it. It might work a little bit incidentally if you just kind of don't really do much else. Sure. But if you really want that to work, you need to be so intentional. You need to put in the effort. It isn't just going to magically wash over you and happen. And you're right. It was a safe space, and it was the fact that these were the same people that I was living with and surrounded by for 3 months. They got to know my, sort of Spanish quirks, if you like, the mistakes that I would make regularly, or the words that I probably wouldn't know. They kind of got a gauge for my level. A lot of the time when we think of immersion, we think, okay, I'm just going to go there. I'm going to rent an Airbnb and live there for a month and go out to the supermarket and restaurants and just, I'm going to be intentional. I'm going to go out and I'm going to speak with as many people as I can. Yep. But most of the people that you're going to speak with are going to be service professionals, right? People serving you food, people giving you tickets, people, driving a bus, whatever it might be, they're there to do a job. Their job is not to get you better at the language, right? So when they switch to English and you think, oh, God, I messed up again. No. It's because they're there to do a job, right? So you need to find, if you want immersion to work, it's about finding the opportunity, seeking out the people who, whether it's looking for local language exchanges, whether it's going to like sort of experiences. So, like a cooking class or a workshop of some kind where you can say, oh, I'm learning the language. Is it all right if I practice? You can make that part of the experience.
True.
I stayed in a great homestay in Cairo where the host would cook breakfast and dinner every day. And they knew, because I told them that I'd learn a bit of Arabic and that I wanted to practice. So every day, like twice a day, I had these moments where I could practice, again, in a safe space, because I've told them I'm not a pro. They're not expecting anything from me.
Yep.
There's no rush because there's no one in a queue behind me. It's just me and them. And we had some great conversations because I was able to have the space to say what I wanted to say, to use things like Google Translate if I needed to look something up. Because that's the other thing, there's no shame in someone switching to English. There's no shame in needing to check a word, right? It's not about, I had to use Google Translate, I had to check a word, therefore I'm not fluent, therefore I'm still terrible. I'm only going to be good when I'm flawless. No. Like, just the fact that you know anything in any other language is commendable.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great tip. Because like you said, people in the real world, they're not going to modify the way they communicate to help you. Unlike the family, because the family wanted to communicate with you, right?
Right.
And
they didn't want it to be awkward with you just sat unable. Of course, you're right. They're going to modify, yeah. Yeah,
and because there's, you're talking to the same people every day, like you said. They want to communicate with you, of course. It's not like, obviously, like you said, people working in a bar, in a restaurant, supermarket, whatever. But even people out there, if you're from Spain, you're learning English, you go to London, you go to a pub and try to speak to people, most people are going to talk the way they usually talk. And, if you're starting from scratch or you're a beginner in the language, that's not going to be too comprehensible. That's why experiences like a language exchange in any type of forum is really going to be useful, because actually in that case, both people are feeling the same way, right? Because if you're helping each other, in your case, you were helping the kids, right?
Yeah.
And the whole family was helping you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Kids are actually a really good point there, because how people always say, children learn languages better than adults. I'm too old to start, or I've missed my opportunity. No. There's two things that, as various research and things, but there's two things that I've noticed come out again and again in the research, and that is that kids do better. The first is that they aren't afraid of making mistakes, and the second is that they are better at pronunciation. Okay. So two of those really can be pinned down to the fact that kids have less inhibitions, right?
Oh, yeah.
So they're just more willing to try. And when we know this as an adult, we have the advantage of life experience and knowledge and being able to then use that knowledge. So when we know this, kids learn languages better because they're willing to just try. They're not afraid of looking like an idiot. We can apply that for ourselves.
Yep.
Right?
It's not easy at first, but
yeah.
So, and then also, getting back to being intentional, like you said, I think you also have to take things into consideration, meaning that given the language you're trying to learn, what's the situation in the country? What I mean by that is, if I want to learn Polish, if I come here to Poland, obviously there's a great chance to learn the language, but like I said, I could live here and not speak a word in Polish because people speak English here. But on the other side, if you go to, I'm going to talk about my native country, you go to Spain, especially to a little place, it's going to be Spanish, right? So in that case, it might be shocking at first, but it's probably going to be a better experience if you're trying to learn the language because there's no other way, right? So little things like that could help. Like I see that a lot in like countries like Poland, Romania, Hungary, places like that they don't have a quote unquote strong language or a super popular language. They're, I guess they're more open to learning other languages. So most people speak English, so you can actually communicate without Polish. And that's not the case in Spain or in Costa Rica, I could imagine, or I don't know, Italy, for example, even France at times, right? So those things, you need to consider those things as well.
That's true. So what we're saying is go to a village.
Right.
In the middle of nowhere.
Exactly.
And baptism of fire.
Yep.
By immersion.
Exactly. And find yourself a family. Yeah. Because, what I mean is if you're going to be meeting the same people every day, like in your case, even if it's extremely awkward and hard the first couple of days, there's no other ways.
Right.
There's no like you're gonna have to actually communicate because you're living with those people, but they're gonna help you. So it's not gonna be as the London example that I was talking about.
Yeah.
More intentional, like you said.
And what I said about, kids learning better and that boiling down to not being afraid of looking like an idiot and making mistakes, that is so much easier when it's forced upon you.
Right. Yeah.
So if you're in that kind of situation, you either accept it and laugh it off when you make a mistake, or you go, nope, this is terrible, I'm flying home.
Yeah.
And most of us don't really want to do the second one. So we end up just going, okay, I messed up. Never mind. I'll try again.
Correct. Yeah. True. And so, let's now go back to your languages now. Because I know you like learning languages in general. And so how do you go about it now? Like if you say you're starting a new language from scratch tomorrow, how would you go about it?
It depends.
On the language? Okay.
It depends on the language. It depends on why I'm learning.
Okay.
How, if I have any kind of deadline, and I know that's an annoying answer. I know that the answer people want is, I do this, this, and this. It's kind of like I said about the not being one method or system, like it's the same thing. So let me think of an example. Right now in India, I'll soon be moving to predominantly Hindi-speaking areas, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've known this for a while, so it's been a gradual sort of slow burn in the background to the point of back when I was at home in the spring, I was using Judith Meyer's Hindi script hacking book. Really, really good, really underrated series. And I was using that just to get familiar with the script. I had no rush. I had no deadline. So that was just like a leisurely extra each day on top of the main language stuff that I was doing for other languages back then. Then as time's gone on, I've shifted the languages on my apps that I use, like more or less daily, because there's always going to be a day where you have a night bus or you're offline for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. And so I've kind of shifted the focus on those to Hindi, right? And then as well as that, like, what else have I done really? Like, that's kind of it. And that's because I'm not worried too much. This is actually a really bad example because I'm not worried too much about learning the language to be able to speak it to this level or that level.
Yeah.
But I just wanted a loose understanding, like a start point to, so I could be like, there's a word I know, like that kind of thing. So let's say, okay, I'll pick Pick another example.
No, I'm thinking of an example. Like, for example, I know you already speak Spanish, but imagine you're someone from an English-speaking country or any other country, and you want to learn Spanish because in the future you want to travel in South America, for example, and you want to be able to communicate with people, right? But so you're not in a hurry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're in your home country, so you don't have a lot of people around you that you can speak Spanish with. So in that scenario, and you're studying from scratch, or
that's good. I can do better with a scenario. I can do better. So, so in that case, what would I do? So the same kind of thing so far, right? So just gradually like dripping the language in, those little things that you can do. I call it like a base resource, right? So like it's often sort of language apps where for many people that's the end. For me, that's like the start. That's like the underlying current of things, right? Where even on a day when you've been really busy, you've got something done. So I would be doing apps, whatever feels right for that level, for that language, whatever I enjoy. Again, coming back to needing to enjoy it. Mm-hmm. And then I would be thinking, right, what am I likely to use this language for? What situations? And so that would probably look like, in terms of what I then do to learn, having maybe a mixture of some live lessons, so online probably, and also then thinking about like beyond those lessons, what happens. So like I said, I would drive around and I would teach, and then I would teach online, and I would always say the same thing. Oh, what have you done since last time? And the answer was nothing. So as a language learner, I'm very aware of of how easy it is to just have a lesson be a bit of a flash in the pan. So I'm quite conscious that if I do have live lessons, I want to really get what I can from them. I see it like every resource, every tool, every lesson that you have, like being this sponge that is full of water, and you can either go, boop, give it a little squeeze, get a bit from it, or you can really wring it out and really get everything from it. So I would perhaps prepare something before the lesson. If I had something I'd been practicing, maybe I'd done something with the apps and they'd written some sentences and I wanted to see if they're correct. Prepare that sort of thing before, to then bring to the lesson, to then say to the teacher, oh, by the way, like, is this correct? I did this, how does this work? Oh no, this one's wrong. Why is it wrong? And then we can dig into why it's wrong, and kind of, we've then found something that was missing from my knowledge. Then after as well. So like it's a before, during, and after. After, I would then be thinking, okay, so that thing that I did wrong in that sentence that we then fixed, I now want to practice that thing that we fixed, that grammar structure that was wrong with the sentence. Let me do some more practice on that thing. Mm-hmm. So each time you're pinpointing, you're finding a mistake, you're finding an error, and you're sort of zooming in a little bit more and going a little bit deeper with it, and then stepping back and saying, how's that? And then going, okay, right, and it could be that it is a live lesson. It could be that it is, what you're doing is you're making sure that you're getting feedback from that. So you can be doing this with yourself if you have a reason that once you have a sort of decent level, or you have some level where, even if it's a level from other languages where you just kind of undstand how they work and you've got some loose expectations of what you think it might look like. So you can be checking for yourself, but then verifying that with either a human, essentially, so a tutor, exchange partner, native speaker, whatever, or with technology as well. So definitely technology doesn't replace the human, but it does when you're unable to verify stuff with a human, right? So like literally asking something like ChatGPT, can you check these sentences in Spanish for me? Are they correct? And then it will say to you, oh, this is correct. This is almost correct. Do you want more explanation? Yes. Okay. Why is that one almost correct? What's wrong with it? So doing the same kind of thing, zooming in. So for every, and that example there of the live lesson, that is how I would approach every activity, every task, is I'm thinking about it in the sense of a before, during, and after process, right? So I have these different processes that I share in my program that's like for listening, for reading, for speaking, for writing. And so there's just the broad scope of it is the same, that there's things you want to do before, there's things you want to do during, there's things you want to do after, but then you tweak it for each skill or for each activity that you're doing so that you are making the most of it and that you're actually going forward rather than just kind of plateauing far too soon.
Right, so that before that you're talking about, in a way, it's a sort of output, right? Because it's like you're using your knowledge from apps, from previous lessons to build your own sentences in a way.
Absolutely.
And then, like you say, hoping for the tutor or AI to correct it so you get the feedback, right? And I'm also curious, so it's everything that you do mostly focus on the language itself, meaning how to put it into words. Like, is it focused on the language as opposed to communication? Is it a bit of both? You know what I mean? Like, because the example you just given me, it's like, so you write down some sentences, for example, and then check with your tutor, right? But is the focus on the specific structures, the language itself, or communication and the language, or is it secondary? You know what I mean?
So, yeah. So in the beginning, communication would always be first. Language would, like accuracy, language accuracy would be second. So for me, for example, my purpose with the example sentences that I would be creating would be, this is the thing I want to say. Am I communicating it effectively enough for now? And then they'll correct me. And like I say, like going deeper down the rabbit hole each time, not necessarily each time. So like they might say, oh yeah, that's wrong because there's a such and such a complicated hujum, a flip and a grammar fit. And I'm like, well, I don't need that right now. Let's put that to one side. But if they say, oh, that's wrong because the word order is wrong, like I said, sweatshirt blue instead of blue sweatshirt, I'm like, okay, I can work with that. I can remember that. That's an easy rule to start me off, so I'm kind of picking and choosing, but communication is the primary.
I understand. So it's mostly things that you feel like you would use in a normal in a normal conversation, first of all.
As much as possible. Yeah, right. As much as possible.
Right. Yeah, the reason I was asking that is because for me at least, like focusing on the language itself, of course, like you said, focusing on the language can look differently if you do it one way to doing it a different way, like you said. But at least for me, it just takes away the joy of learning the language. Like focusing on grammar points, I just don't enjoy it at all. You know what I mean? Like, I'd rather focus on the message, on communication, and let it. I don't know if I'm using the right words, but let language acquisition happen on its own. Know what I mean? Like, so the topic we're talking about, whatever it is the most important thing. I want to communicate, or want to play a game, or want to create a story, whatever it is. And then, of course, like you said, you can look at simple things, like general things that are going to help you understand how the language works, right? Because I'm talking about my personal example when I'm learning other languages. It takes the joy away from it. Actually, it takes me back to my high school, primary school days when I was learning English that way.
Yeah.
And
this is it. This is why there's no one thing I really love is like etymology. So if I see a word in a new language and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this looks familiar, then for me, the joy is going down that little rabbit hole, just finding, oh, it's connected to that language. Oh, that's so cool. What's the, like historically, how were they connected? For some people, that's going to be like, do not care, So, and it's finding the joy for you, finding what is, I call it the 3 F's of language, right? Flexible. So, it fits into your life. You're not trying to like fit your life around language learning. Language learning fits into your life as it is. It's functional. You actually are learning. It's working, right? And it's fun. And they're the three things that like across the board you want to be looking out for. Like, is this fun? Is this flexible? And is this functional? Yep. And if it's a yes, 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 keep going. If it's a yes and a yes, something you can alter, you can adjust. If it's no, 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 scrap it.
Right.
Whether that's an activity or, the time that you have lesson, like, forget it, scrap it.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I'm thinking about my own journey. Like sometimes when I talk about it, I tend to lean too much towards what works for me. I mean, it makes sense, but I mean, when I'm trying to give advice to other people, because I don't get any joy out of like consciously learning the language, the grammar rules, and so on. Like etymology is okay. Like you said, like I understand what you mean. Like, oh, so this is like a new word, and you understand what it means because it reminds you of this other one, or So I take some joy in that. But what I mean is, if I focus on the language itself, on form, as opposed to meaning, I just don't enjoy it. And like I said, it takes me back to my old high school days when I learned English. I could pass pretty much any grammar exam, but I just couldn't use the language, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, now I'm learning German now, right? And the way of going about it is by watching content on YouTube made by teachers or content creators who, told stories, talked about cultural things in a way that it was comprehensible for beginners, of course. And that way, I've climbed my way up to being able to understand native content, native podcasts, and that's what I love, right? Like focus being purely on communication and language acquisition happening as a sort of side effect, right?
Yeah.
But in that process, what I also wanted to ask you about is, because we've talked about it a little bit with your experience in Costa Rica, but it's that myself, and I see it in a lot of people, getting to a point in which you can understand a lot of the language is, quote unquote, relatively simple or doable, But for me personally, and for a lot of people, the biggest struggle comes from that transition between, being able to understand quite a lot of the language to actually being able to communicate and use the language. Do you have any tips, any advice on that? Anything that you've done that has helped you? And again, I guess it depends on the language, on immersion, like we said. But if in the example that we talked about, that you're learning Spanish to be able to travel to South America in the future, but now you're in England, for example, like would you just go for the trip directly and that's going to be your first output? Or how would you go about it?
Yeah. 3 words: solo, speaking, habit. So we often think of everything else in language learning, reading, listening, writing, vocab, grammar, all of that stuff, as being something you can do solo, something you do alone, right? But speaking, you've got to wait until your weekly lesson. You've got to wait until someone is stood in front of you. You've got to wait until you're immersed and you're ordering your food with the waiter. No, you don't. You don't have to wait to speak. And the minute that you realize this, the minute that you have this moment of, oh, I need to practice this thing, otherwise I'm not going to be good at it, is huge. And I had this moment, years ago. It was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not practicing speaking. Of course I can't speak. And I often compare it to if you are a piano player and you expect to just show up at the concert, everyone's there, the arena is full, you just rock up on stage, the spotlight comes on, you've not practiced, you're going to sound terrible, right? There's no way. Like the Eras tour, Taylor Swift's tour happening right now, did not just happen magically on night 1. Like, let's just wing it, guys. No. Hours of rehearsal. And it's the same thing. And so when you're thinking about like speaking and just Do you just go to South America? Yeah, you could. Absolutely. You could. And landing and immigration and speaking to that person at the booth as you hand over your passport could be your first spoken interaction, of course. But if you practice beforehand, you're going to feel so much better. You're going to feel much calmer, much more prepared. Yep. And so, yeah, solo speaking habit. Like, speak as often as you can. Speak solo and make it a habit. Like, that's the way to do it. So that it just becomes easier. You feel more relaxed with it. You feel more confident. You know, because when we speak, there's a lot going on. First of all, it's something that is typically instant and it's something that is temporary. So the fact that it is compared to writing, like writing is much slower. You got time. You can take your time, but it's more permanent. So you can take your time, and you kind of want to take your time most of the time because it feels like, even if no one's ever going to read it, that pen going on the paper feels, there's more permanence to it.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're speaking, the words just come out. And so that's good in the sense that hopefully no one will remember all of the mistakes you make, but it's instant. So you need to know what you want to say.
Yeah, I know.
And so it's like you're figuring out what you want to say, how you want to say it, and then you're actually articulating it and saying it, right? So when you're doing a solo speaking habit, you can be getting better at all of these stages. First of all, you can make things really easy for yourself and eliminate the what, and you can just be thinking about the how and actually saying it. So you could be reading something you've already written. You could be reading anything that anyone else has ever written in the language aloud. So you can be speaking that way. That's the easiest way to do more speaking. Then you can be, you know, if you then feel like, okay, I'm doing all right. I'm, you know, in terms of the how to say it and the pronunciation and stuff, that's feeling okay. Then you can also be mixing in some things where you're speaking things that you have created. So maybe you write yourself a short introduction. You get used to saying that aloud. You write yourself some sort of mock dialogues of what might happen when you stand there at that immigration booth and hand over your passport. You know, what might you expect? And then you can start to practice just speaking spontaneously, just as you're walking around the house and sort of narrating your day and all of these. It can happen anywhere, anytime. You can record it, which is really good because then you've got this documentation of progress. You don't have to record it every single time. You don't have to record it at all, but I find that it helps just because it's a nice sort of track record of what you've done. But yeah, that's the answer. And I know it's the answer no one wants. No one wants the answer to be practice. You want the answer to be magic key, woo, effortless.
Right.
But yeah, the answer is practice. So let's speak in habit.
Magic potion, yeah. No, but it's great because I've been asking this question a lot recently, and I think the pattern is exactly what you said. Like most people are telling me that you need to practice, and because that's exactly what I'm doing with German now. And what I've observed is, first of all, it's harder to get started because you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
As opposed to just sit down and listen to the language, which is passive, and you could do it all day.
Yeah.
But the most important thing here is the moment I start doing it, I love it. So it's hard to get started, but when you do get started, I love it. And it's I was gonna say so what I'm doing is, like you said, I'm just talking about a podcast that I just listened to. I'm thinking of or trying to imagine conversations in my head of I'm sort of narrating what I'm doing. So for example, I'm gonna be cooking, so I'm gonna start speaking German. Okay, so now let's go get the onions now. Let's, I'm talking to myself about it out loud, of course. So things like that are really helping. But I've noticed that like it's harder to get started. Like you procrastinate on it. Like I don't want to do it. But the moment you start doing it, it actually feels great because first of all you can see that you're capable. It's the safest of environments because
the safest. Yeah, it's just you.
No one's judging you. Sorry.
you said like it's hard to get started. Like anytime there's anything with your languages where like, it's hard to start that, or I want to do this thing, but I can't, I don't know, for some reason it's not happening. It's like there's little hurdles to get there. And you want to knock down those hurdles. You want to try and reduce the friction between where you are now and starting that thing or doing the thing. And, that could be that like recording yourself is one of those hurdles, because it feels like, I have to pick up my phone and I have to find that, and I don't want to hear myself back. Yeah. And what if I don't do anything with it? Then why have I bothered recording myself? You could have all sorts of thoughts about that. So then don't record, right? Whatever it is, trying to kind of self-identify again, becoming your own teacher, making those decisions for yourself that you can trust about like what you're doing and how you're doing it is really important.
Yeah, like eliminating friction as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's funny because, like I said, now that I can understand native content, I could be listening to German for 10 hours a day. Because unlike at the beginning where, I could only understand this much. Now that I can understand things that I'm actually interested in, like travel documentaries, podcasts, whatever, I could be listening to German all day long, which I'm still doing, like to some extent, because I think it's still helping me, of course. But you gotta get to that second part, because, like I said, what's the word? It's like it feels harder, like I said, but it's totally worth it. I mean, because you need to. Because I used to believe that just the input part was enough, but I don't think it is.
No, the output, even if your goal isn't to speak with others or to communicate or to be able to write, if it's not an active goal to be able to do those things, the output is like the consolidation of all the input that you've had. It's a chance to kind of piece it together in a way that you understand and think, actually, do I get that? Can I do that? Like, it's easy to read something. It's easy to, look at a vocab list and think, yep. Okay, that one I need to learn. But it's much harder to actually use all of those. We have a much bigger receptive vocabulary than we do productive, which is completely normal. Yep. But the output can be where that stuff then becomes part of the productive vocab that we're able to use as well as understand. It all depends on what your goals are with any language.
Yeah, with output you sort of shorten the gap, right? There's always going to be a gap, of course. Like there is in your own native language, right? Like you can...
Absolutely. Most normal thing in the world. Nothing wrong with there being a gap between what you understand and what you can produce. Yeah, right. Completely normal.
Yeah. Cool. And any final message, Lindsay, for language learners out there?
Simple question. Keep going. We've covered so much. Yeah, go back to the start and listen again. Yeah, we've covered so much. No, I don't think there's anything else left to add. Yeah, thank you for such a great chat.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. And yeah, of course, I'll leave link to your channel and any website or link that you want me to link to. And yeah, it's been a pleasure, Lindsay.
Hey, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
See you soon.
Bye. Lindsay. Thank you. Thanks so much for watching this interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful for you. And if you want to know more about language learning, language acquisition, like, what's the best way to learn a language, ideas for language learning, the best resources at different levels. Here, you can find the whole playlist with all the interviews I've done so far with different researchers, teachers, polyglots, and so on. And finally, right here, you smash this guy right in the face to subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.